In 1939, Gone with the Wind made history, but its stars were falling apart. Clark Gable drank heavily and tried to quit 3 weeks in. Vivien Leigh had mysterious breakdowns that shut down production. Behind their passionate scenes, a dark secret threatened to derail everything. Today, we expose the untold drama that almost destroyed Hollywood's greatest film. Vivien Mary Hartley was born on November 5, 1913, in Darjeeling, India, when it was part of the British Empire. Her father worked in the Indian cavalry, and her family lived a comfortable life. Her childhood was filled with warmth and privilege. When she was just 3 years old, she stood on stage for the first time and recited Little Bo Peep for her mother's theater group. Nobody could have guessed it, but that small moment was a glimpse of her future. The happy life in India didn't last forever. When Vivien was 7, her family left India and moved to England. It was a long and tiring sea journey, but it marked a big change in her life. She had to leave behind everything familiar and adjust to a completely new world. Once in England, she went to a convent school in London. It was a strict and serious place, and adjusting to the colder, quieter life, there wasn't easy for her. But she made a friend there, Maureen O'Sullivan, who would later become famous for playing Jane in the Tarzan movies. As Vivien grew older, her life became more exciting. She traveled across Europe for her education, learning new languages and cultures. In France, she became fluent in French. In Italy, she picked up Italian. And in Paris, she attended a finishing school, where she fell in love with theater after watching a performance of Hamlet. That love for acting and Shakespeare stayed with her forever. When Vivien was 19, she married Herbert Lee Holman, a barrister much older than her. They seemed happy at first, and soon after, she had a baby girl named Suzanne. But Vivien couldn't give up on her dream of acting. She started attending drama school, even taking her baby with her sometimes. Her husband didn't like this at all. He didn't approve of her passion for acting, but Vivien wasn't ready to stop chasing her dreams. Her acting career began with small roles in British films. They were called quota quickies, cheap movies made to meet legal rules. Her first role was so small it only lasted 30 seconds, but it was a start. While working on another movie, she decided to change her name to Vivien Leigh, combining her own name with her husband's middle name. This new name became part of her identity forever. Vivien's big break came with the film Fire Over England, 1937. The movie was set during Queen Elizabeth I's reign and had a large budget for a British film of that time. Vivien played Cynthia, a lady-in-waiting to the Queen, portrayed by Flora Robson. During filming, she met Laurence Olivier, who played the lead role. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable and soon led to a real-life romance that would become one of Hollywood's most famous love stories. The movie premiered in London with King George VI and Queen Elizabeth in attendance. It was both a critical and commercial success, making £92,000 in its first year and cementing Vivien Leigh as a rising star. Meanwhile, Clark Gable was born on February 1, 1901, in Cadiz, Ohio. His father, William, worked as an oil well driller and farmer, while his mother, Adeline, died when Clark was just a baby. After her death, his father remarried a kind woman named Jenny, who became very important to Clark. Jenny loved books and music and shared that love with him. This made Clark interested in the arts, even though life on the farm wasn't easy. The family had little money and moved a lot, which made Clark's school life difficult. By the time he was 16, he had been to more than 12 schools. Then something heartbreaking happened. Jenny died suddenly, and it left Clark feeling lost. His father wanted him to work in the oil fields, but Clark didn't want that life. So he left school and got a factory job at Firestone Tire, earning just $10 a week. It was hard work, but this was when Clark started dreaming about something bigger, maybe even becoming a star. When he was 23, Clark decided to follow his dream. He moved to Hollywood with his wife, Josephine, who was also his acting coach. She was much older than him, but believed in his potential. Josephine spent all her money to fix Clark's teeth and teach him how to speak with a deep, confident voice. She even helped him improve his posture and style. But even after all this, Hollywood wasn't kind to him at first. Directors often turned him down, saying his ears were too big and his face wasn't handsome enough. Clark didn't give up. He worked small jobs, including selling ties, and took any acting role he could find. For years, he played tiny, uncredited parts in movies, but nobody noticed him. Feeling frustrated, he went back to theater and performed in over 100 plays. This hard work made him a better actor and gave him the experience he needed. Clark's big break finally came in 1931 with a small Western movie called The Painted Desert. He played a villain in the film, and even though it was shot in the hot Arizona desert under terrible conditions, Clark's performance stood out. People loved his deep voice and tough guy charm. The movie wasn't a huge hit, but it was enough to get MGM's attention. Soon, Clark signed a contract with the studio, and his career started to take off. He worked non-stop, appearing in 12 movies in just 1 year, which made him a rising star. People loved his rugged looks and confidence, and it didn't take long for him to become one of the most popular actors in Hollywood. In 1934, Clark got a role in It Happened One Night, a romantic comedy that changed his life. At first, he didn't even want to do the movie. MGM loaned him to a smaller studio as a punishment, and Clark thought the film would be terrible. His co-star, Claudette Colbert, didn't like the project either, but something surprising happened. The movie turned out to be a huge hit. Audiences loved it, and Clark's performance made him a household name. One funny scene where he took off his shirt even caused a nationwide drop in undershirt sales. The movie went on to win 5 Academy Awards, including Best Actor for Clark. This made him one of the biggest stars in Hollywood and showed everyone that even unexpected roles can lead to greatness. Then came a movie, Gone with the Wind, in 1939. The search for Scarlett O'Hara was one of the longest and most exciting casting stories in Hollywood. It started on July 17, 1936, when David O. Selznick bought the rights to Gone with the Wind for $50,000. Selznick spent over 2 years searching for the perfect actress, interviewing 1,400 women and doing screen tests for 90 of them. The search ended on January 13, 1939, costing $92,000. An unheard of amount for casting at the time. It became a big event. Selznick sent scouts all over the country, to theaters, schools, and small towns, even holding open auditions. Women showed up dressed like Southern belles, hoping to catch his attention. Some took things to the extreme. One woman wrapped herself as a Christmas package and delivered herself to Selznick's house, dressed like Scarlett. Famous actresses like Bette Davis, Katharine Hepburn, and Joan Crawford were considered. Fans even voted in a magazine poll, with Bette Davis winning 40% of the votes. But Selznick wanted someone new, someone who could become a star because of this role. This decision kept people interested for years. Vivien Leigh, a British actress, decided early on that she would play Scarlett. She read the book in 1936 and told her friends, "I will play Scarlett O'Hara. Just wait and see." Her agent submitted her name in February 1938, but Selznick didn't care. He said he wasn't excited about her and hadn't even seen her photo. Leigh didn't give up. In December 1938, she traveled to Hollywood with Laurence Olivier, using their relationship as an excuse to be there. On December 10th, while Selznick was filming the Burning of Atlanta scene, her moment came. Selznick's brother introduced her, saying, "Hey genius, meet your Scarlett O'Hara." That meeting left an impression, and soon, Leigh was in serious consideration for the role. She worked hard, studying Southern accents and practicing Scarlett's mannerisms. She even gave friends copies of the book, signing them as if she already had the part. On January 13, 1939, her persistence paid off. She was officially cast. Selznick's decision to cast Vivien Leigh was a huge risk. She wasn't American, let alone Southern, and she wasn't well known in the U.S. After spending so much time and money on the search, picking her felt like a gamble. The movie's budget had already climbed to $3.9 million, making it the most expensive film ever made at that time. Selznick had to borrow money and sell distribution rights just to finish the movie. But Leigh's screen test convinced him. He thought she had Scarlett's wildness and charm. To calm people who were upset about casting a British actress, Selznick pointed out her partial Irish heritage, just like Scarlett in the book. He also said British and Southern accents weren't so different. Clark Gable, who played Rhett Butler, was the opposite. Fans had been calling him Rhett even before the film began, but Gable didn't want the part. He felt pressured by everyone's expectations. He worried he couldn't show all the emotions Rhett needed, especially in a scene where Rhett cries. Gable didn't want to ruin his tough guy image. Director Victor Fleming filmed the scene two ways, one where Gable cried and one where he didn't. Gable also tried to avoid the role entirely. When Selznick asked MGM to loan him out, Gable begged the studio not to do it. But MGM saw the film's potential and offered Gable as part of a deal. He finally agreed after negotiating a $120,000 salary and making sure he could spend Christmas with his wife, Carole Lombard. Clark Gable was under so much pressure while filming Gone with the Wind that it showed in how he acted on set. He smoked as many as 3 packs of cigarettes a day, much more than usual, and started drinking heavily. People on set often smelled whiskey on him. His insecurity became obvious during the famous "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn" scene. He thought he wasn't doing it right and made them film it 65 times, delaying the schedule for a whole day. That one scene alone cost the production $50,000, which was a huge amount of money back in 1939. Gable also had a hard time with Rhett Butler's Southern accent. Even though he came from Ohio, he needed to sound like he was from Charleston. He worked with a dialect coach for 4 hours every day for 2 weeks before filming. But even after that, he felt embarrassed. He avoided using the accent off camera because he didn't want the crew to laugh at him. This created awkward moments because Vivien Leigh stayed in character as Scarlett, speaking with her Southern accent, while Gable switched back to his regular voice. The stress became too much for Gable after 3 weeks of filming. He asked producer David O. Selznick to release him from his contract, and even offered to return the $120,000 he was being paid. It took a long night of convincing, involving MGM boss Louis B. Mayer and Gable's favorite scotch, to make him stay. Ironically, his insecurities added depth to his performance. He used his feelings of doubt to make Rhett Butler a more complex and relatable character. Vivien Leigh had an even tougher time. She was a new actress in Hollywood and had to work 16-hour days for 125 days straight, which was over 2,000 hours of filming. By the middle of the production, she had lost 12 pounds and weighed only 98 pounds. She was exhausted, with migraines, insomnia, and even temporary vision loss in one eye. On July 1st, 1939, while filming Scarlett's famous "As God is My Witness" scene, she fainted because it was 113 degrees Fahrenheit on set due to the bright Technicolor lights. Her mental health also began to crumble. She had mood swings, crying fits, and during a 22-hour shoot for the Atlanta fire scene, she had a nervous breakdown. The production had to stop for 3 days so she could recover. To stay awake and alert, Leigh started using Benzedrine, an amphetamine, which led to a cycle of energy crashes and overwork. She also smoked up to 4 packs of cigarettes a day. During one long shoot, she smoked 103 cigarettes, which shocked the crew. Her heavy smoking caused a constant cough, and during one scene, she fainted from too much nicotine. Leigh's dedication to the role was intense. She memorized the entire script, which was over 1,000 pages long, and even corrected other actors' lines. Her perfectionism caused retakes over and over, like one scene where she slapped Butterfly McQueen 48 times just to get the right sound. Despite all of this, her hard work paid off. Her performance as Scarlett O'Hara was unforgettable and earned her the first of her 2 Academy Awards for Best Actress. The production wasn't just hard for the actors. The directors kept changing, which made everything even more chaotic. The first director, George Cukor, was fired after only 18 days because of creative differences. But rumors said Clark Gable wanted him gone. Leigh and Olivia de Havilland were upset and secretly met with Cukor on Sundays to get advice for their roles. Victor Fleming, who had just finished directing The Wizard of Oz, took over, but he had a tough, no-nonsense style. This led to clashes, especially with Leigh. During one scene, she yelled at him, called him a bastard, and stormed off set. Fleming eventually had a breakdown after 41 days and left temporarily. A third director, Sam Wood, came in for a few weeks before Fleming returned. These constant changes caused inconsistencies, especially in Gable's performance, which varied depending on who was directing. On top of all this, Gable had bad breath, which became a problem during kissing scenes with Leigh. Years earlier, he had all his teeth removed because of gum disease and wore dentures. Combined with his heavy smoking, this caused terrible halitosis. During one kiss scene, Leigh complained to the director about Gable's fetid breath. To fix it, the crew made a special mouth spray for him with peppermint, cinnamon, and cologne. Even with the spray, Leigh found it hard to hide her discomfort, especially during long kissing scenes. After one take, she joked, "Kissing Clark Gable isn't as exciting as people think. His dentures smelled awful." The chaos and stress behind the scenes could have ruined the film, but somehow it all came together. When Gone with the Wind premiered on December 15, 1939, in Atlanta, it was a huge event. Over 300,000 people came to see the stars. The movie stayed in theaters for 4 years, from 1939 to 1943. By the end of its first run, it made $32 million. Today, that would be about $595 million. The critics loved the movie as much as the audience did. It was nominated for 13 Oscars and won 8, plus 2 honorary awards. Vivien Leigh, who played Scarlett O'Hara, won the Best Actress Oscar. This was amazing because she wasn't very famous before the movie. The New York Times said the movie followed the book perfectly. Over the years, it was re-released in theaters 7 times, most recently in 2019. Adjusted for inflation, Gone with the Wind is still the highest-earning movie ever. After playing Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, 1939, Vivien Leigh became a huge star. Everyone expected her to stay in Hollywood and act in more movies, but instead, she surprised everyone by going back to England in 1940. World War II had started, and she wanted to be close to her husband, Laurence Olivier, who had joined the Royal Navy. She also wanted to help the war effort. Between 1940 and 1945, she worked hard, performing in 107 stage shows for soldiers. These shows weren't easy or safe. Once, on June 10, 1944, just days after D-Day, a bomb exploded near the theater where she was performing. Glass shattered everywhere, but Vivien stayed calm and kept performing, even though people were panicking. Even though Gone with the Wind made her famous, Vivien didn't take every role offered to her. She turned down many big movies, like Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca, 1940, even though he wanted her for the lead. In 20 years, she acted in only 6 movies, which was rare for a star as popular as her, but people still loved her. In 1944, she was the first British actress to appear on the cover of Time magazine. In 1946, when she visited New York, 20,000 fans crowded the streets to see her. It was so chaotic that the police had to step in. 2 of her most important movies after Gone with the Wind were Waterloo Bridge, 1940, and That Hamilton Woman, 1941. In Waterloo Bridge, she played Myra, a ballerina whose life takes a tragic turn during World War I. Vivien wanted Laurence Olivier to act with her in the movie, but the studio chose Robert Taylor instead. This upset Vivien, and she didn't talk much with Taylor while filming. However, their chemistry on screen was great, and critics loved their performances. That Hamilton Woman was different from her other movies. It told the story of Lady Emma Hamilton and her love affair with Lord Nelson, a famous British naval hero. Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, secretly supported the movie because he wanted to inspire Americans to help Britain during World War II. The movie was made very quickly. Filming took just 62 days, but it became a big hit. It was even banned in Nazi Germany because of its powerful message. Vivien's greatest role came in A Streetcar Named Desire, 1951, where she played Blanche Dubois. This role is considered one of the best in film history, but it wasn't easy for her to get. The producers wanted Jessica Tandy, who had played Blanche on Broadway, but Laurence Olivier convinced them to choose Vivien. On set, things were tough. The director, Elia Kazan, made her act scenes over and over. In one scene, she had to say the famous line, "I have always depended on the kindness of strangers," 48 times. By the end, she was so tired that she fainted and needed smelling salts to wake up. Despite all of this, her performance was amazing. She won her second Oscar for Best Actress in 1952, making her the first British actress to win 2 Oscars. Her win was part of a historic moment because 3 of the actors in A Streetcar Named Desire won Oscars, which was very rare. After playing Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, 1939, Clark Gable made a surprising decision. On August 12, 1942, he joined the U.S. Army Air Forces. Everyone in Hollywood and across the country was shocked. Gable was 41 years old, much older than most recruits, and he didn't have to enlist because of his age. But his wife, Carol Lombard, had tragically died in a plane crash just 7 months earlier. Her last telegram to him said, "Darling, your luck held again. I'm so glad. I love you so. Please, take care of yourself." Her words and her strong support for the war effort deeply moved Gable and pushed him to take action. Even though he was a huge star, Gable didn't want special treatment. He trained just like any other soldier. He completed officer candidate school and became a second lieutenant on October 28, 1942. His time in the military wasn't without risks. Adolf Hitler, who was a fan of Gable's movies, reportedly offered a reward to any German soldier who could capture him alive and bring him to Berlin. Gable didn't just sit on the sidelines, he flew on 5 dangerous combat missions in B-17 bombers. On one mission over Germany, his plane was hit by enemy fire, losing an engine. 2 shells hit near where Gable was standing with a camera, narrowly missing him. He also worked on a military film called Combat America to encourage men to become aerial gunners. The film captured the real dangers of war and became very popular when it was released in 1945. For his service, Gable was promoted to major and earned several military honors, including the Distinguished Flying Cross. After nearly 2 years in the Army, he left active duty on June 12, 1944. His time in the war deeply affected him, changing how he saw life and his career. When Gable returned to Hollywood, fans were thrilled to see him again. His first movie back was Adventure, 1945, directed by Victor Fleming, who had also directed Gone with the Wind. The studio hyped the film with the tagline, "Gable's back and Garson's got him," referring to his co-star, Greer Garson. But the movie's production wasn't easy. Gable had gained weight during his time in the Army and looked older. The studio put him on a strict diet and exercise plan to restore his leading man image. The movie's story about a sailor falling in love with a librarian was seen as unoriginal and boring. Gable didn't like the script and had arguments with the director. At one point, he walked off the set, delaying filming and costing the studio money. Test audiences didn't like the original ending, so the studio filmed a new one, which delayed the movie even more. Despite these problems, Adventure made over $4 million at the box office, but critics were mixed. Some said Gable seemed uncomfortable in the role, and others felt he looked tired. This movie marked a change in Gable's career. It became clear that he couldn't just rely on the charm that made him famous before the war. He needed to take on different, more mature roles to stay relevant in Hollywood. In the later years of his career, Gable appeared in 2 big films, Mogambo, 1953, and The Misfits, 1961. In Mogambo, he played a hunter caught in a love triangle with Ava Gardner and Grace Kelly. The movie was shot on location in Africa, which made it feel authentic, but came with challenges. The cast and crew dealt with extreme heat, diseases, and even political unrest. Gable almost didn't take the role because he thought he was too old, but the studio convinced him with a $500,000 paycheck. The film became a hit, and both Gardner and Kelly earned Oscar nominations. The Misfits was Gable's final movie. It told the story of a group of outcasts in Nevada and starred Marilyn Monroe and Montgomery Clift alongside Gable. The production was very tough. Temperatures in the desert were extremely high, and there were constant delays due to Monroe's personal struggles. Gable gave an incredible performance and even insisted on doing his own stunts, including a dangerous scene where he was dragged behind a truck. Sadly, just 2 days after filming ended, Gable had a heart attack. He died 10 days later, on November 16, 1960, before the movie was released. The film was a modest success at the box office, but over time it became recognized as one of Gable's finest performances. It was a fitting end to his career, showing his ability to play deep and complex characters. In his later years, Gable faced challenges as the quality of roles offered to him declined. Hollywood was changing, with new, younger stars taking over. One example of this was The Tall Men, 1955, a Western that was criticized for its weak story and Gable's tired performance. Critics said he seemed disinterested, which hurt his pride because he had always been very professional. In Teacher's Pet, 1958, Gable played opposite Doris Day, but their age difference, he was 24 years older, made their pairing feel awkward to some viewers. This problem of being paired with much younger actresses became common in Gable's later films. In It Started in Naples, 1960, he co-starred with Sophia Loren, but he was not the first choice for the role. This reflected how his status as a top leading man was fading.